Okay, the first is going to be on page 143 of our book. That's not the regular page, on page 143 of our book, Tshuva Kuf Daled. I'm not going to read through everything, I'm just going to show you where I am. Today I'm going to be discussing more along the דימום of Makkah, but it's also going to be discussing Rea Damach Mastashmish. And then on Sunday we're going to continue with Makkah and discuss also Yeledes, which is a separate topic within Makkah, she sees after Leda. Siman Kuf Daled has a question as follows. A woman finds Ksamim, sees after Tashmish, she saw a few times, but she was not yet Muchzak. She did not see 3 times in a row. She has no idea where the blood is coming from. She doesn't feel any pain, she doesn't feel anything, but she sees blood after Tashmish. However, her husband has Michush Hameridin, which is hemorrhoids. And he always finds Ksamim on his clothing down there in that area. That woman, and doesn't find Ksamim anywhere else. And now that woman has a Veses Kavua. That's important to point out because you remember from when we learned Sifhei, a lot of the kulas when it comes to Rea Damach Mastashmish and Amaka has to do with Veses Kavua, because if a woman has a Veses Kavua, then she has a Chazak also of Tahara while she is in between the days of or not Veses Kavua. So when you want to take it, when you want to create a new Chazak of Rea Damach Mastashmish, to uproot the Chazaka is harder than when a woman doesn't have any real Cheskas Tahara that the blood could come whenever it wants. So that's when it's a Veses Kavua, it's easier to be Mekel. So this is talking about the Veses Kavua. And the Rav who asked the question had 2 svaras to be matir. Why he wants to be matir this woman. Svara number 1, and by the way, Tzemach Tzedek knocks out both svaras. They sound like good svaras when you read them in the beginning. The first svara is that he says, well, the Alter Rebbe in Sifkot Yud Gimel brings you the Agos Sharet Dura and the Munah Shmuel, that a woman who does a Bdika Shveferes after 3 times, and she does not find anything, she is mutter to her husband afterwards, even without Shiva Nakim, and even if she sees afterwards again, she's mutter forever based on this that we found, that we say that there's a Makkah and it's Minat Tzdadim and it's not from there. Why? Because Huvra Adavar became clear that the blood that she saw during Tashmish was from the sides and not as a result, not from the Makkah. Therefore, based on that logic, over here that the husband has something which causes bleeding in that area, we could say Huvra Adavar that she saw blood, that the blood that she sees comes from him, not from her, and therefore she's mutter. Svara number 1, why she should be mutter l'bayla, not only.
Why did she see all the time then? If it's from her.
Because hemorrhoids also don't happen all the time.
The stronger svara should have been just the fact that Shimsha didn't happen, but that means we're trying to.
That means she's mutter l'bayla mitzad Rea Machmas Tashmish, but with Shaila if she's mutter mitzad Shiva Nakim. Mitzad Rea Machmas Tashmish is definitely mutter because there was no huchzuk. That's not a Shaila b'chla. The Shaila is now, if you could be Toiler, we're discussing it from Rea Machmas Tashmish we move to Makkah, right? That's the subtopic of this siman is Makkah. So we're discussing, this is not a question of whether she's Asura Machmas Tashmish or not. The question is about being matir her based on the Makkah that her husband has, which seems to cause bleeding, that seems to cause blood to be visible on her clothing after Tashmish.
Is that stronger? They can generally say that the other Shimsha is stronger than the Shefet, because it's a stronger eye.
Right, but other Shimsha after 3 times.
Only after 3 doesn't work after.
Before you don't need to. The Shiloh of Zainakim, but it doesn't solve that problem. Of what?
Why is other Shusha before you get to the time now saying that?
Then we're going to get to it soon. Don't jump ahead, but that question is there. Not specifically the way you phrase it, but the answer to your question is further down. Second reason is, the Ramah holds that when a woman has a veses kavua, if she has a makkah, and we don't know if it's moitzi dam or not, but she has a veses kavua, she could rely on it. That's the shit of the Ramah. So, Lamaise, we're not going to be mekel against. That's an Alter Rebbe was not mekel, didn't go for it so easily. But in this scenario, when the makkah is by the husband, so maybe we could rely on that also. So Tzemach Tzedek pretty much splits the tshuva. Let's split the tshuva in two parts. Really, it's split in three parts. Right? We're only going to do the first two parts of the tshuva. The first part of the tshuva is Seifim Aleph Beis Gimel, which answers the first question, discusses the first svara about when you do a bdika sheferes or ava v'shimsha afterwards, that becomes a raya. So maybe we could use it as a raya. We could use here as a raya the fact that he has as a birur. And then Seifim Dalad Hevav, he discusses about the second reason that he brings about could we be toil in the Baal. And the third part of the tshuva, I don't know how I ended up over here. There's a kitzur of Aleph Beis Gimel Dalad Hey and Vav, and then suddenly it moves. Sif Zayin starts Benidin Hashayla Hashainis. Doesn't tell you what the question was. Probably wasn't the same tshuva, and it discusses a din in Hilchos Shchita. So we're not going to discuss it in this shiur, even though somebody did tell me that the Kolel should be teaching Shchita, but that's not in the plans as of now. So let's start with the first part. The first thing that Tzemach Tzedek explains to you over here in Sif Aleph is it tells you you want to compare the Huvrar Hadavar that you do after Bdika Sheferes to the din to this case. You can't. Why? Very simple reason. The Rashba tells you that until a woman becomes muchzak and re'eh machmas tashmish, what do we consider every single re'eh until then? If she sees once here, once there, every single re'eh is considered that she had an early veses. That means she saw, we consider it dam nida, we do not consider it re'eh machmas tashmish. Because she's not muchzak and re'eh machmas tashmish. It's a veses that came, shalei bizmana. It's mashma from the Rashba, that obviously, if he considers it a veses that came shalei bizman, obviously the blood is tamei and she needs shuvanikim. Also, the Alter Rebbe, when he discusses this, he says in Sifkot Nches shepereses nida beloy eis. Again, he also says that the times that she's not, we consider she was so nida. So obviously, that means that the blood that she saw when she was not muchzak and re'eh machmas tashmish is regular pereses nida shalei bizmana, and you need shuvanikim, and that blood is tamei. And we don't say, it came from the tzdadim, and therefore she's fine. We don't say before we do the bdika, we don't say it came from the tzdadim. We say pereses nida, she was nida, and she's fine, and she's tamei. So what's this bdika all about? After she becomes muchzak and re'eh machmas tashmish, and now we changed her chazaka because she had a chazaka of veses kavua, and now we come and we change that chazaka. She got a new chazaka. The new chazaka is that she's re'eh machmas tashmish. So now when we do research on this chazaka, and we do the bdika sheferes, and we determine that it's minat tzdadim, what we did is we undid this chazaka completely. We took this chazaka and we say every single time that she saw prior was minat tzdadim, as is proven now, and every single time she's going to see from now on is also minat tzdadim. But that could only happen when you have a chazaka that comes first. You made a chazaka re'eh machmas tashmish, and then you undid that chazaka. Why? Because we say the fact, if it was re'eh machmas tashmish, she would have seen min hamakar. She didn't see min hamakar, so obviously she saw. Obviously it comes from that tzdadim, but that's only after you determined that it was because there was a chazaka. But before that, you don't have it. But a woman who does not have this chazaka, to be ate, and then we cannot use this bdika shriferes to say retroactively that it was minat zdodim, or a bia to say that the previous bia when she saw was also minat zdodim. That doesn't work, because up until then we still have the Rashba, and the Alter Rebbe also brings it that way, that when she saw before, that's still considered pirsa nida, that's still considered dam nida, and it's not nothing to do with machmas tashmish. So being that it has to do with seeing a veses, we say early veses came, logically a shreferes or a bia is not going to help you anything. Because if you put a shreferes during a time when there's not supposed to be veses, she's not going to see anything. Obviously, not minat mokeh, not minat zdodim. And if it's but because we say these ones that are not machmas tashmish are just nida, regular periods. So therefore, according to the Rashba, according to the Alter Rebbe also, she needs shiva nakim. That is Sif Aleph. First reason why you cannot compare this woman who did not see, because we're discussing the first three Sifim, talking about the woman, the next three about the man, over here we're talking about the woman now. Comes the Tzemach Tzedek and says, oh, but this doesn't work according to the Shittah of Taisvus. Because the Taisvus, when it comes to a din of when she saw a Meraglayim, one of the things that he mentions is that midloi chazoy svara, she didn't see before Meraglayim and didn't see after Meraglayim. The charai, that the blood that she saw with Meraglayim came from Meraglayim and not from anything else. The svara midloi chazoy, that's the name of this svara. She didn't see before, she didn't see after. Right? And that Alter Rebbe does mention this in the Kuntra Sachrin, as a svara that maybe in Rei Machmas Tashmish also after one time, we could also say, we use as a svara of Midoloi Chazoi, she didn't see before, she didn't see after, maybe it's Take caused directly Machmas Tashmish, maybe you're not going to need 3 times. Yeah, but Tzemach Tzedek says ultimately the Das Taisvus is a singular daya, not everybody. The Rashba, Rashi, Chuvas Maram, in Agoyis Maimonides don't hold like it. So he doesn't,
I thought he used it as a sniff.
Sniff lahater? No. He says you can't use this as a sniff lahater. All you can do is we still stuck with the Rashba, and therefore you can't just brush it off. And then in Sif Gimel he comes and he re-explains this idea again. And the guy goes into the svara of the Shari Dura and the Muna Shmuel, which we say that they hold that you don't need Shiva Nakim when she does the B'dika Sheferes. And he says, according to them, first we explain the Rashba. Now, when it comes to the Rashba, you remember we're going to get to it also again later, there is a machlekes how to understand the Rashba, the Shach against everybody else. The Alter Rebbe seems to take the sword of the Shach, but we'll leave that for on the side. Now moving to Shari Dura and Emunah Shmuel. He says, even according to them, their svara is also when she is Roya Machmas Tashmish when she's Roya Machmas Tashmish 3 times and it's Huchzika. Because then it becomes, when you have a chazak gemura, the Lashon that the Tzemach Tzedek uses, it becomes a chazak gemura. It says, Look, Shirei Machmas Tashmish Gimel Parim Ritzufim, the Huchziko Zu Li Yisrei Kol Pam Sheshamesh, the Gimel Parim Ritzufim have a chazak gemura, then becomes a chazak gemura. Mishum Hachi, therefore, when she does not see one time afterwards, after that one time, then you have to start researching. You have to start looking. Maybe what's the reason? What happened? Why didn't she see now? And then we could be proved backwards and forwards that the blood came from the tzadim. But if she was not muchzik yet, that means she did not see gimel pomim letzufim. Then you can't bring any raya from the fact that she didn't see now. You can't say, oh, maybe what she saw is from the tzaddim. Doesn't help you anything. He says, not only according to the Rashba, this doesn't work, according to Mona Shmuel, Sharadura also, what they're matir without Shiva Nikim, and what they're matir is only after she's huchzak and Roya Machmas Tashmish 3 times. But before she's Roya Machmas Tashmish 3 times, you cannot use the B'dika Sheferes to help and say, and do a research, because it's not going to help you to undo something which you don't know about yet. Why? Because before that, if she sees one time, she doesn't see a second time, she sees a third time, I mean, she sees 2 or 3 times random, or she only saw twice and she didn't see a third time, and she was not muhzak. What are we going to say? The fact that she did not see now, when she was shimsha, is, we say that there was a mikra eidala. He says, "Apamahu mikra haya sheidala liras machmas tashmish v'achshav lo eidala mikra zeh." Then it happened. No, it didn't happen. And it was a vessels that came. Not a vessels, it was machmas tashmish, but it came. It happened then. Didn't happen now. Before she's muhzak, you can't use the bdika to undo anything. To be able to use the bdika, you have to first establish something that you want to undo. You can't undo something which doesn't exist yet. And if she does not see 3 times machmas tashmish, therefore she's not hochzika. The way the lashon of Tzemach Tzedek is mikol makom nekoit miu biyad chad beloy rasa gimel panim letzufim veloy hochzika midarabanan gam ken shetire machmas tashmish leis man de sovar. Nobody holds Shenema, Shenoima, we're going to say, because she didn't see afterwards, it retroactively shows that the blood is from Tzdadim. Because it doesn't prove you anything. Just like she saw sometimes and she didn't see sometimes. We'll say this time she didn't see. Last time she saw. There's no chazaka. It's very simple. There's nothing to argue. It's very simple. It's not shaykh bichlal to establish that a b'dika sheferes or she was with her husband and nothing was visible before there was a chazakeh, that proves anything about the prior blood, that it was minat zdadim. All it does is she's not married and therefore we say it's a veses. If we say it's a veses, she needs shiva nekim. She's not mutter without shiva nekim. So to use that as a raya doesn't help. And he brings also from the Chuvas Maram that he says when she sees Roya Machmas Tashmish a few times, not Yurav Emun Shmuel. According to them, there's no Bechlal no Svarim. The people who are more Machmas, then for sure there's no question that she can't avoid shiva nekim. So if you want to use the first svara, he tells you the first svara doesn't work for you. So strike it off the record. That's the first, tells that the first svara doesn't work for you. To be able to go and say that the fact that we see by the husband that he has blood in his clothing in that area, that's a hover hadavar. That hover hadavar doesn't help you because the hover hadavar will only help when there's already a chazaka of remach tash, which then use a hover hadavar to undo it. But over here you don't have yet a chazaka, so the hover hadavar doesn't help you anything. So we're down with the first svara, doesn't work. Second svara, for the husband has a market, right? We think so. So why can't we rely on that market and say that what the woman sees, what the woman saw is from him, and therefore she's mutter? So first he tells you the Rashba and Siman Kuf Tzadik, same Rashba, not this Rashba and Siman Kuf, which is brought to Siman Kuf Tzadik. He writes clearly over there, when you want to be toile in a husband, you only be toile if the makkah is vaday moitzidam, not if it's maybe moitzidam. Only when you know there's a makkah, and the makkah is vaday moitzidam. The Alter Rebbe brings it over there towards the end in Sif Chaf and Siman Kuf Tzadik. And Tzemach Tzedek points out, but derech agav, an interesting point, that this is a proof. The fact that the Rashba writes in Kuf Tzadik that you need a makkah of vaday moitzidam is a raya to what the Shach says over here in Kuf Pei Zayin, that the Rashba also held over here that you need a makkah of vaday moitzidam. The Rashba, as you know, the Shach disagreed with everybody else on how to understand the Rashba, and he says even according to the Rashba you need a makkah that's vaday moitzidam. So the Tzemach Tzedek says that from there you can bring a raya to here. Why? Because you cannot separate the two kinds of makkahs. There's no tzvara to be mechalek between a husband and a woman. The question is, when are we toilet in the makkah? The Rashba tells you we're toilet in the makkah when it's vadei moitzi dam. That's what he tells you over there. Obviously over here he holds the same. The only time we're makel in a makkah that could be moitzi dam is by ksamim. Over there, if she has a makkah, that's going to be able to start bleeding, then you could say that it's moitzi dam. Then you could be toilet for ksamim. And over there we say, if the husband has the makkah, or the son has, or the husband and the son, they went past someone. When it comes to ksamim, we always attach them together. If she passed through a butcher, if the husband passed by a butcher, if the son passed by a butcher, if she has a makkah, if he has a makkah, he also is the same thing. You can't separate the two. So when it comes to ksamim, we say, a makkah that you don't need to know that it's moitzi dam. But again, just don't forget what's the reason. Just a side note, and this we're going to see soon. Alter Rebbe clearly tells you that when it comes to makkah, the reason, even according to those people who say it, you don't have to have vadei moitzi dam, is because every makkah is a bruise which in it is blood. So therefore, there's potential for bleeding. So that's why makkah, even if it's not vadei moitzi dam, sometimes it could be toilet in it. So that is that. But he says we can't compare it to here. Why? Because over here we don't know yet if he has a makkah. The fact that he has ksamim in that area of his body, it's not enough to bring a raya. Why? The fact that he sees ksamim on his clothing in that area, and she sees ksamim on her clothing, is not enough, because you can't take one kesem and you can't be toilet one kesem and another kesem. You can't say, because the kesem here, the kesem there, it probably came from the same place. Why don't we say that by ksamim? Because ksamim is dependent on external things. There was a bug here, there was a bug there. It's not the same bug in both places. You can't be toilet kesem and kesem. Over here we're not talking about ksamim, we're talking about gufa, her body. Over here, she sees machmas tashmish. How? Because she checked afterwards. If she did a bdikas aid, that, the way that Tzemach Tzedek writes it at the end of the second column over here, he says, she sees blood, therefore you cannot be makel. She doesn't. She has no hargasha when she does a bdika. Still no. Say hargasha tasa, hargasha shamash, hargasha seid. So therefore, it doesn't help you. So now that doesn't help you. So we're going to say no. Maybe being that the ksamim are always in the same place by the husband, it's a raya that blood that he sees came from that area. And maybe we could compare it to Sif Zayin, that when a woman sees blood, when a woman sees in a petza, and Sif Zayin and Arsiman, and Sif Kuf Zayin, that when a woman sees blood in a specific area every time, and it's a raya that it came from, you could be toiler in a makkah in that area. So first of all, he tells you it's not so pashut. The Taz is choylek. And he says that you can't just rely on the fact that the blood came always from one side and say that it becomes kosher. You also have to have a knowledge that there is a makkah in that side. And also just a vesas kavua. You have to have three things to support. You have to know there's a makkah, know there's a vesas kavua, and then if she sees blood always on that side, we say she has a vesas kavua. We know she has a makkah, and we see the blood on that side, so it's fine. Right? So it's not so clear to go straight according to Shulchan Aruch. He tells you no, Alter Rebbe does paskin like that it's enough just that as a proof. Alright, so now it's a problem. If the Alter Rebbe tells you it's a proof, and the Tzemach Tzedek tells you Alter Rebbe is basroihu, he's after the Taz. Ve'ein lanu lischakim neged daita akdoisha. We can't find a way to go against, I'll be more machmer than Alter Rebbe, pretty much. But how does it apply here? He tells you it still doesn't apply here. Tzemach Tzedek, after he writes this, says no, but still over here, the Alter Rebbe says doesn't apply. It's not relevant to here, Bichlal. Why? What is the Alter Rebbe talking about? What is the Shulchan Aruch talking about? When a woman sees blood in a specific place. Because then we say the woman who saw blood, she sees something in that side. That's a davar barur that the blood that the woman saw for sure came from that petzah, from that makkah. So therefore, she's tired, that we're metayin her. But over here, the fact that there's blood on the husband might be a raya brura that he's bleeding. It doesn't solve the problem of the wife. You don't have a raya on the wife that the blood that she saw came from a makkah. Still is a suffix. Still a suffix on the wife. So therefore that also doesn't work. The second swara. And Sivavi also, in Sivhei brings a Siddur Tahara, Kul of the Siddur Tahara. He says doesn't like the Kul of the Siddur Tahara. I'm going to skip it now. Then he gives the Eitzah. Sivavi gives the Eitzah. The husband should wear a beged around his amma, should be able to see something from white pishton, be able to see if there's any blood over there. He knows for sure it came from there. And then you could be toile that the blood that she saw came from his aver, and for sure, and then she's not going to eat shiva nekim. He wears the whole day. He's going to wear a cloth, a kiss on his aver, and then if it's going to be bleeding, it's going to come from there. You know, if it's going to come, if there's blood in that.
If the hemorrhoids gets to there, you'll see.
If it's hemorrhoids, because if it's hemorrhoids, it's not going to end up over there.
He said they never found it. They never knew, even though he has hemorrhoids, they never saw the bitter that it came out of it.
There's no bitter. So now, if you want to say, so he tells you if he's going to see from his aver, then fine. Then you could be matter that the blood that she saw also came from his aver.
What if he sees with the kiss?
With the kiss, he sees in the kiss throughout the day.
He said hemorrhoids doesn't come from it.
Exactly. So that's the point. He says the hemorrhoids doesn't help you anything. So he tells you, he says, the only way it works is if he wears a kiss.
No, so the hemorrhoids you can't be telling.
No, can't be telling hemorrhoids. We're not sure about it if it taka bleeds or not. So that's how he explains. That's the eitzah he gives, and then he could be toilet. And then he explains why not choishish. There might be a svara to be choishish even when he sees in the kiss that he wears. We could still say it's a suffix. Maybe the blood that she saw on her body, it's a suffix. According to the Rambam, maybe it came from the aliyah, maybe it came from the other place. It's vaday dam. He says that's too much of a suffix. We're not going to go so extreme on that. That is the first tshuva I want to discuss. Yeah, that's the takana. And the second half, the next part of this tshuva is about shchita, where the Tzemach Tzedek discusses about sirchus, making meat which is meat which is not glat in the lungs, and he says even though the Alter Rebbe paskins to be machmir, and but the Alter Rebbe also holds that whoever is mekel, you can't throw him out of the community. So that's just this. We're not going to get into it now. Maybe if one day we'll learn shchita, we'll get into it. Yeah. Siman Kuf Ches. Turn 2 pages, page 150. It's a short one. I mentioned it in the previous shiurs, and then I'm going to go to Kuf Yud Beis. Kuf Ches. Interesting scenario. A few times that, you see, now I skipped Kuf Zayin because Kuf Zayin is about giving birth. That I saved for Sunday. Kuf Ches, we're doing now. Kuf Zayin and Kuf Tes I'm going to do on Sunday, and half of Kuf Yud Beis. Now I'm going to Kuf Ches. She saw Dam Machmas Tashmish a few times. There was no Hochzak. She went to mikveh. She saw Dam Machmas Tashmish. But she didn't see other times. And the way it works with her is that towards the end of the bia, the husband feels that he is hitting something over there, and she feels pain at that moment, And right after Tashma, she sees blood. So this Bia, the end of the Bia, at some point in the Bia, the husband touches a certain part with his Avid, obviously touches something over there, and it becomes, she feels pain, and afterwards it's bleeding. And we don't know, obviously, if it came from the Makir, or if it came from the Makkah. Now that he touched it, we don't know, but she's not muhzik. So first, the Tzemach Tzedek summarizes to you in 6 lines, general about Rea Machmas Tashmish. If there was no 3 times Ritzufim, then she's not Nesa L'Bayla. Yeah, so we don't have the problem with Rea Machmas Tashmish. If there were 3 times Ritzufim, and then afterwards there was bias that there was nothing there, or there was a b'dika shviferes, then you have 3 shittas. We have 3 main days. One day is that if she sees again afterwards, 1 time she becomes a surah l'bayla. One shit is that you need 3 times afterwards to become a surah l'bayla. 3 times again after she's fine. That's all based on if you follow the shit of Nisrape. And then there's a shit that no, she makes a b'dika, she's muteres elamis. Yeah, anytime she sees afterwards, she's kosher. Yeah, there's 3 different ones. So over here, that she has sometimes beer that does not generate bleeding, and sometimes beer that does generate bleeding. So over here he says, it seems to be a makkah. Why? Sharei bigmar bia abal margish unegea bifnim bedover, ube'eis shehu negea he margeshes kev gadol, v'teikef achar atash shemitzis hakesem, im keinikor sheminamokim shenegea bo hakesem b'avalei makkah. So first is, logically, we're going to say this is considered a makkah. You didn't check, you don't know if it's a makkah there. The fact is, she feels pain, he feels he touched something, and she bled. So 1 + 1 + 1. Well, 1 + 1 is 2. So we have 1 + 1 + 1 is 3. And that's it. It's very simple. 3 things together. So it should be a makkah. You're going to ask the question, maybe what is he touching when he feels it? Maybe the rechem dropped a little bit. So when he did his aver hit the rechem, and the blood that comes, it comes from the rechem. So maybe it's still a suffix. So he says, no, the Beir Yaakov is mitzadet lahokel, even though the Behuda is,
If it's a mark on the rechem, what's the problem?
we don't know, it becomes a bigger suffix. You don't know if it's a mak in the rechem or not. Maybe you just touched the rechem, you don't know. She feels pain, you have no idea what's going on. So he says, even though the Behuda over here, even though the Behuda is machmer, it says over here it's different. Why? Shani hocha shani, he says over here because you know that the bleeding came al yedei negia. Muchach she'adam yitzim is amokim. Obvious that the bleeding is coming as a result of the negia in this place, which is painful, and therefore that blood is coming from a makkah. And the makkah is from there and not from the makir. So therefore, l'bayla, she's not aser. About shiur nakim, so shayla, if shiur nakim she needs or not. Tzemach Tzedek says any pnai ka'is la'ayin, I have no time to research it, and therefore she needs shiur nakim. That's over here. Now we're going to move to Kuf Yud Beis. Kuf Yud Beis is a very interesting medical one. We're going to do half of it today and half of it Sunday, leave you in suspense, so all you come back on Sunday. Kuf Yud Beis, page 156. A woman for 3 years had pain in her shoulders. And every single day when she would get up from bed, she would be spitting up blood. This is you spoke about when you talk about something else, no? In this shiur? No? Okay. and she did various refuahs and sgulas and everything, and to see if she could become better or not. And what happens? At some point, the bleeding stopped she stopped throwing up blood in the mornings. But he spoke about when he talked about the other nemanus of doctors, yeah. And then now what happens is that she sees blood, she feels pain in her chest, no more in her shoulders, she feels pain in her chest, and she has a hargosha, and she sees blood coming out from her uterus. And she feels pain, every time she feels pain in her heart, and then she feels blood coming out. So then first the Tzemach goes into a discussion, when could we trust doctors? When a doctor is reliable, when a doctor is not reliable, do you need doctors to be completely reliable or not? He brings in the Gemara to a certain scenario where they did ask a doctor, but then the Chachamim checked what the doctor said afterwards. Then he goes in Sif Beis and he says, Yesh lahavin, I have to understand, do we rely, I'm samchin al roi from the Gamrei? Do the Chachamim rely on the doctors completely, or they relied on the doctors because the Chachamim checked afterwards what the doctors did, and they were able to see that what the doctor said was true? And he says it's mashma from the tshuva of the Shus Yaakov that when the doctors tell a woman that she does have a makkah, you could rely on the doctors. Yeah, it seems maybe you could rely on the doctors. Tzemach Tzedek is medayik from the Shus Yaakov from a different tshuva over there also, that if the doctor says this woman has this makkah, then you could rely on him. But if the doctor says this woman has this symptom, which in every other woman means a makkah, then maybe you can't rely on him. Yeah, Elamai, maybe you would still need to do, but back to the Gemara, maybe sometimes you still have to double check what the doctors say, even if the doctor is going to say there's a makkah, but it's a makkah, and he has a proof that there's a makkah, that from it blood could come out. And therefore, l'chayra should be tahira, maybe we'll still need a bdika, and more so because there are shittas, the Maral of Mentz, who says that you could only rely on doctors, the Reifa, yeah. That you could only rely on doctors. When could you do that? Only when there's a proof, they prove their statements. Or you don't need an absolute proof to make a determination. But so their words just add to the question. And then he brings the conclusion from from this doctor of Mentz, that if the doctors say clearly and without any question, then Chachamim do rely on the doctor. So the doctor has to tell you clearly, we know there's a makkah, this woman has a makkah, this makkah is bleeding, then you could rely on them. But if the lashon is over here. Masha'enkin be'inyan shechochmas harefua eino geizeres aleo davar vadai ki'im efshari. The doctors tell you this is a possibility, a probability, but nothing for sure. Va'efsharahu eini maspik leheter. That efshar is not enough to be matir. Al zeh aniyim eshen lismech aleim. In such a case, you can't rely on the doctors. So what do we need in this scenario, this question? Tzemach Tzedek tells you in this question, you don't need any doctors. Without any doctors, you could tell that this woman has internal bleeding. Sometimes the pain causes internal bleeding that came, she threw up blood. Sometimes internal bleeding came out the other side, came out from the bottom of the body. And there's two proofs to it that Tzemach Tzedek says. Proof number one is because originally, this is in Sif Gimel, proof number one is because for 3 years blood came out from her throat. Then all what happens was that she thought she solved the problem. All that happened is that the blood didn't come out from her mouth, from her throat. Rather, it came from the other side. So that blood, is the same blood, the same blood that used to come from her neck. And he brings a raya from the Sefer Yitzhak that sometimes you could have a blood that comes out from moves in the body and comes out from the rechem. It could go from the bottom of the body, could come up, could throw up blood sometimes. It's the same way, blood could go from the top, from the chest. When she feels pain, could go down into her body. I asked the Jewish doctor, and he also holds that is that. And the second raya is, because how does it work over here? She starts. How does this bleeding work with this woman? First, she feels pain, big pain. Then the pain spreads in the body. And it's a shooting pain. Mageshes cave godel b'mokim anal hanikra shtechenish. Shtechenish is like it's like needles. Yeah. So today, if such a woman would come to the doctor, they would send her to, they would think she's having a heart attack every day. But I guess then they didn't know exactly that. And then right after this pain passes, she starts seeing bleeding. She has a vesis kavua, and she knows that during a vesis kavua, the pain that comes is a different pain. During vesis kavua, the pain that comes, she feels pain in her back. That's the vesis kavua pain, the regular pain. This pain is a different kind of pain. It's a separate kind of pain. She feels pain, pain travels, spreads out in her body, and then after she starts seeing bleeding. So it's muchach that the bleeding which comes as this result is blood from other parts of the body, not from the rechem, and that bleeding ended up in the rechem, and from there it left the body. So therefore, in such a scenario, when you know that, and plus you obviously have a doctor, the doctor also says Kainhu, then you could rely on it. So now he says the tshuva from the Shach's Rav. A woman that has a vesis kavua, and during the period she never has pain, but always a week later she feels pain, that excruciating pain, she's screaming from pain, and it develops a blister with pus, which comes out green, and then afterwards a little bit of blood. And he says, over there the Shach's Rav tells you that you could be matir according to the Mordechai. If she has a vesis kavua, you could toile in a makkah. Why? Because if you have raglaim ledover, that what she sees now is different than what she saw during her vesis, then you could rely and you could say that this is a makkah, this is not damnida. The Bach goes a little bit more extreme. He says not only if the woman feels it, but also if anybody who understands a little bit realizes that she has a makkah, like the old women say about specific things, that's already considered enough. So therefore, he says, according to the Bach, Tzemach Tzedek says, uses the same words as the Bach, but understands a little bit, or understand that this woman that has blood, that had bleeding for 3 years, without, and after she feels pain, to say there's a bleeding that she sees now, the same bleeding that she saw then. And even though the Bach required the Sfek Sveika, the only reason it was matter was Sfek Sveika in that scenario. Over here you don't have a Sfek Sveika because you know for sure the blood is coming from the Rechem. And the the tshuva of the Rabbi Shalashach required mention that there was no argosha, and over here she does have argosha. He says over there the makkah wasn't mevurer, wasn't a clear makkah, and there was no real knowledge of that makkah as meitzidam. But over here it's a makkah that we know that it's meitzidam because that same makkah used to be meitzidam previously for 3 years, and we have proof that it comes from there. So therefore, that could serve as a proof. And then he brings Trumas Hadeshen, that if she finds, if the svara that we see in Shulchan Aruch, that she always finds a specific place, you could rely on it. He says, maybe the bleeding that came, it's the bleeding taka maybe came from a different aver, but it got absorbed through other avarim, and it came out through the shvile dam nida, through the veins of dam nida, and maybe that bleeding is Talmudic blood. He says, in this scenario you don't have to worry about that. Why? Because it flows right away. She feels pain and right away she starts bleeding. You could be mako. And especially since the doctors say that for sure came from there. Right? That seems like this is a very simple explanation. And seems like over here is where the Tzemach Tzedek pretty much ended Lokot part 1 of this tshuva. He writes a kitzur on it, and then suddenly at the end of the kitzur of Ois Hey, which is on the bottom of page 158, the Tzemach Tzedek writes, "V'tzorich iyun gadol l'maisa." Can't rely on it. Then Tzemach Tzedek Lokot writes part 2 of the tshuva, Masha Koshali. Whole different. This is what we want to go through. I'm not be able to do it today, so I'm going to go through it on Sunday. I'll just give you a quick nikud of what's being discussed over here. Topics which he discusses is could be the bleeding that's coming is coming from the top part of her body. Maybe that bleeding mixes dam nida, ultimately it's coming from the rechem. Maybe the makkah is not what generated the blood, but what caused the blood. Maybe you can't be matter so fast. The fact that she has pain is only a proof that there is a makkah in her body that causes her to release dam nida. Because the blood that's in the rechem, maybe that's nida blood, it's in the veins. He explains over there the blood is in the veins, and the makkah, the pain causes the dam nida to be released. So maybe she's not mutter. That's the whole discussion that comes up, and that goes from seif vav through the end of seif ches. And over there he ends by saying that I can't be matter this woman. And he adds then he has 2 more additions. This tshuva was written, looks like it was written first till Sif Hey, then Vav Zayin Ches, then Shuva Achar Zman, he adds a paragraph that I saw tshuva of the Chasam Sofer. And then Achri Kos V'Kol Anal at the end, he goes back and he says, Avarti Shein Sal Tshuva Zu, and discusses it differently, and then we're going to go through this in the beginning of Sunday when it comes, because I don't see I'll be able to finish this in 10 minutes. The what? Later? I say he brings the... It's later, no? Let's see. I think it's later, yeah. Roisi and Emes Asher Roisi Bedivra Goin Adoni Moiri Zal. That's in Oisvav. Sifvav is where he starts that. Okay, we mamshech Mitzvah Hashem on Sunday. There's going to be a shiur this afternoon on something else for me.